This is The Witcher Season 1. What is a Witcher? What happened in Season 1 of The Witcher? What was going on with the timeline? And what were the things that we might have missed? Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Let Me Explain It, OK YouTube channel. Season 1 of The Witcher is found in the penultimate line of the last episode of the season. Geralt finally meets Ciri and says that people linked by destiny will always find each other. Geralt and Ciri are linked by destiny, and this Season 1 is effectively the story of how and why they met. And it's not just those two who are linked. The last line of the season that Ciri says is "Who is Yennefer?" because Yennefer is also linked to the two of them. Geralt tied his fate to hers. We'll get to the details of that in a bit, and because he is linked to Ciri, this makes the three of them a little family of sorts. Season 1 is therefore the origin story for this little triumvirate, but that's the end of this season's story, that coming together of Geralt and Ciri. For the most part, our three main characters aren't together this season. In fact, although this story is broadly told from their three perspectives, and those three individual stories are broadly each progressing forward stronger than jumping around, what we see happening in any given episode is usually three different stories from three different points in time. So, in Episode 1, we see Yennefer from a long time ago, Geralt from at least 16 and probably more years ago, and Ciri from just a few days or weeks ago compared to the season end, which sounds complicated. But it really isn't whenever we see Ciri. It is now the time that we see at the end of the Season 1, and whenever we see Geralt or Yennefer until the very end, it is sometime in the past. They don't appear to age because of magic and mutations. What we see happened to them spans decades for them. There are big jumps in time between episodes. Their stories, they're often happening years apart, are told side by side not to confuse us, but to help us see the echoes and similarities between all three of their backstories. For example, in Episode 2, Ciri meets Dara and Elf, who saves her. We learn of Yennefer's quarrel heritage and why that's important, and Geralt encounters the King of the Elves, who gives us a bit of background about the elves and spares his life. These three events take place decades apart, but are linked, so we are shown them together in the same episode. The other bit of context we need to know before we dig into the detail of Season 1 is that this season is loosely based on the first two books, about the which are the two collections of short stories called The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny. I say loosely because although the overall story arc is the same, there are a lot of changes, both in terms of stories being omitted and details being tweaked or invented, particularly when it comes to Yennefer X's background and what Ciri gets up to you. That's not a criticism. By the way, overall, this is a pretty good adaptation of the source material, and the writer of the books was involved. But we do need to acknowledge that this is a slightly different world to better the books. It's also all set well before the time of the video games, if you've played them. So let's go through the story of Season 1 in its true chronological order, rather than the order in which we're shown it on screen. So what's important here for the story arc as a whole is that she has clear, raw, magical power and is recruited by Saya after she unintentionally portals into Arethusa. Yennefer's magical power is not just random. She is a quarter elf, and it is the elves who originally held the magic in this world before the humans took it and tried to erase that part of history. Magic in this world is about controlling chaos, and for Yennefer, it soon turns out personally to also be about controlling her emotions. She is a conduit for chaos like the other initiates, but her ability to control it is related to her ability to channel her emotions when the other pupils are trying to catch lightning in a bottle, and some of them succeeding. Yennefer can't do that, but when she gets angry, she can hurl lightning at someone. She is a raw magical talent, so the other initiates who are just good at being a conduit are turned into eels and trapped there to help boost the magical stock of arrow to Zur. But Yennefer and Fringe Illa, more about her in a moment, are both deemed good enough to be initiated into the Brotherhood of Sorcerers. There is a bit of a subplot here about Astrid, Yennefer's lover, giving away her secret that she has elven blood, but the important point is that in order to ascend to being a proper magician, she must lose her ability to have children. This will be a huge factor in her decisions. Later on in the season, the other thing that happens is, of course, that she gets to decide on what she looks like. She decides to change from a face and body that most people seem not to find attractive to one that most people seem to find very attractive, and somewhere along the line also gains a killer dress sense and a first-rate makeup palette, becoming the Yennefer we know and love. She goes to the ball in trances the King of Vengerberg and gets to be the court sorcerer to aid him rather than Nilfgaard, which is where the Brotherhood of Sorcerers wanted her to go, at which point we should probably talk about why this placement is important. What the Council of Wizards actually does the geopolitical situation on the continent more broadly, because all this forms the backdrop to pretty much everything that follows this part of the world of The Witcher, is carved into a number of small kingdoms, and the Brotherhood of Sorcerers sends each of them their own court sorcerer. If they will have them, the sorcerer is there to advise and to aid, but should at least retain a loyalty to the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood themselves take a rather paternalistic approach to the continent, trying to remain neutral where possible, but having a clear view on what is best for everyone and ensuring the Brotherhood's interests are protected at all times at the time at which Yennefer is being considered as a potential court sorcerer. There are no real overarching military powers, just a whole series of kingdoms squabbling with each other. Yennefer's decision to manipulate her way into getting to aid him where she came from, rather than Nilfgaard to the south, may have seemed quite insignificant at the time. But there were two key implications first. It meant that Sintra, another city-state, decided to keep up its opposition to having a court sorcerer throughout the whole period, where Pavetta was developing her magical powers, so that came as a surprise to everyone again. More about that in a moment. And secondly, Yennefer going to aid him meant that the sorcerer Afrin Jinnah was sent to Nilfgaard, and Nilfgaard, with fringe Eilist support, grew in strength massively over the next 30 years or so. Invading one small kingdom after another, Yennefer wasn't there. In fact, she spent those 30 years off-screen getting more and more bored and frustrated in the backwater of Autumn. So let's leave her there and pick up with Geralt. We don't see his whole origin story, although we're told about it in snippets through the season. I won't go over the whole Witch of mythology now, the signs, the mutations, and swords, and so on. But let me know in the comments below if you'd like that kind of thing in a future video. Instead, we meet him as a fully fledged Witcher traveling the land looking for jobs. The first episode is when he gets his nickname and reputation as the Butcher of Blacken, which follows him around thereafter. Although it's tempting not to look for any count to development in Geralt, he is his same gruff, monotone self. Throughout, the Geralt we see here is undoubtedly different to the counter we have at the end of the season, when he does go on our character arc of sorts. Here, he is more of a loner, not wanting anyone's help, and is even a bit idealistic in his own way. The two antagonists in this episode spend their time trying to convince Geralt that he should pursue what they consider to be the lesser evil out of two options in front of him. Geralt doesn't even want to engage in that discussion, because evil is evil. He says full stop. He wants to be independent and attached, not taking sides, but here he learns that that is not always possible. He tries not to take the side of the wizard Strega Ball and then not to take when free side, but he soon realizes that blood will be shed either way, and out of self-defense really kills quite a few people, including when free, when he tries to redress the balance by preventing Strega Ball from taking Renfro's body for autopsy. Their people encouraged by Strega Bor turn on him. Geralt here learns that being neutral is not always possible, and to compound matters, he gets a reputation as the Butcher of Lavich, on which sticks with him. Not only are witches distrusted generally, but he is now feared personally for someone whose livelihood depends on commissions from strangers. This is a problem in short. From then on, Geralt has a PR problem. The stories about him precede him wherever he goes, which point enter Yassia or Dandelion. If you are used to the books and video games, he enters a story the very next episode and immediately spots an opportunity that would be beneficial to both of them. If he hangs around with Geralt, he will get a lot of good material for his songs, and Geralt will start getting a bit of positive PR in the medieval and fantasy worlds more broadly. The role of a minstrel is not just that of an entertainer. They are the storytellers, the passes on of truths and legends. Most people never get to meet kings and wizards and witches, so their opinions of them were formed by the stories and legends of them and the songs that were sung about them. Songs like Toss, according to your Witcher, are really just medieval versions of propaganda. Geralt could have made Ysgir stopped following him very easily. Instead, he lets him hang around, shares meals with him, and even lets him lead him to places he wouldn't otherwise go, like Sintra for that feast. Geralt may have been grumpy about it, but he had learned the value of not just operating on his own, but being in a team, at which point, let's turn our attention to Syndrome. We mentioned it in passing earlier, noting that it hadn't had a court sorcerer for a long time, so there was no one there to notice the magical stuff going on beneath the surface, and it turns out that there were two rather large magical things going on that nobody had noticed the first happened years before Geralt was there. Basically, the king got into trouble and was saved by Dummy. The hedgehog man, who, when asked to name his reward, invoked the lure of surprise, he asked to be paid what the king already possessed, but did not yet know about whatever windfall he returned home to find. As rewards go, this is a bit hit and miss, of course, because the king could have gone home to find an apple left out for him or a new pair of pantaloons or whatever. But what he actually returned to find was a new daughter, Pavetta. Now, this doesn't mean that the new princess belongs to Dany like a slave, but that their fates were bound together, and Dany does return in secret many years later to woo her, and they fall in love. But the important point to note here is that the lore of surprise is more than just an old tradition which should be honored. It's about destiny. One of the most important concepts in this, a lot of people, including Queen Calanthe and Geralt himself, initially don't take destiny very seriously, but it is undoubtedly, to borrow a phrase from C.S. Lewis, part of the deep magic of this world, something that is true, and there regardless of what you might think and cannot be prevailed against. So jumping back to Geralt and that feast, it was supposed to be a betrothal feast for Princess Pavetta to seal a political alliance, but Dany turns up to claim what is his by right, and by destiny. Queen Calanthe, not caring about the law of surprise, tries to get Geralt and pretty much everyone else to kill Dany when Kalani herself tries to kill Dany. Princess Pavetta, who is in love with him, finally cracks and unleashes her more magical power, because this is the second magical thing that's been going on all this time in Cintra that no one spotted. Pavetta is an incredibly powerful magic user. The upshot of all this, though, is that Queen Clamp they allows Dany and Pavetta to marry. Dany is cured of his hedgehog curse, and Geralt is asked to name his reward for stopping all the bloodshed. He, of course, jokingly invokes the lure of surprise, that which Dany already has but does not know about. And of course, we then find out that Pavetta is pregnant. So the unborn child, this child of a union forged in destiny and daughter of an immensely powerful raw mat accuser, is now tied to Geralt. His four-letter response to this realization is understandable, but Geralt is Geralt, and he hasn't yet learned to embrace destiny, so he walks away. He went returned to Cintra, and we won't see Ciri, that promised child, until she is grown. We're told she loses her parents tragically at sea and is raised apparently relatively happily by Calanthe. Her grandmother during those years, Geralt pretty much carries on doing his Witcher thing. There are hints that his destiny is tugging at him. He says he isn't sleeping well, and he's searching for a djinn which can obviously grant powerful wishes. He finds the bottle. But of course Askia intervenes, and in order to try to save him, Geralt finally meets Yennefer and their two timelines converge, at which point, let's catch ourselves up on why Yennefer has set herself up in a random small town. She was, as we saw, serving as caught sorcerer in Aidham for 30 years. But that came to a dramatic end when she gets caught up in an assassination attempt on the queen, and her young baby Yennefer eventually escapes with the baby. But the baby dies in her arms. Holding that baby as it died clearly had an impact on Yennefer. It reminded her of what she gave up to be a sorcerer, on how much, despite everything, she still wants children. She goes off-grid, understandably not returning to the court where the assassination attempt was planned. Instead, she sets up a shop in an obscure town, selling spells to locals and putting them in a trance so that they have an orgy in front of her. It seems anyway, it appears that what she's really doing or trying to do is find a magical way to get back her ability to have children. Seiya, her old mentor, turns up and basically tells her to calm down. She's become obsessed, and as the key to her magical powers is controlling her emotions, this could get quite dangerous for everyone. So enter Geralt. He wants her to cure Yskyr, which incidentally is more evidence of girls growing character during the season. It was, yes, Kia's own stupidity that caused the problem, but Geralt is still trying to save him at significant personal cost. Yennefer, of course, spies an opportunity. The djinn surely has enough power to bring back her ability to have children, so she tries to capture it. Geralt sees as to say us, or that the attempt would destroy her, and he uses his last wish with the djinn to, well, we'd never find out for certain exact what he wishes for either on the show or in the books. But it is something along the lines of tying Yennefer's fate to his. This meant that the djinn couldn't destroy her as it couldn't destroy its master Geralt, and as all 3 wishes were then used up, it could escape Geralt and Yennefer, then have sex. But Geralt, never the gentleman, and ever on the run from destiny, leaves first thing in the morning. Next up, we have the dragon hunt sometime later, that Geralt and Yennefer both find themselves on what we have missed. In the time jump between the Gian episode and the dragon episode is a long period of time off-screen where Geralt and Yennefer keep meeting, being drawn together and torn apart. Their fates are tied together. The dragon hunt is fun, but the most important thing that happens here is actually right at the end. Watch. The dragon stalks movingly about the importance to him of the baby dragon, his child that he has been protecting, and the conversation escalates quickly from there. Geralt admits that he used his last wish to bind Yennefer's fate to his. She understandably takes offense of this questioning, whether her feelings for him are true or just the result of magic that he basically taken away her free will. He takes offense at that and accuses her of flitting about like a tornado, wreaking havoc just so she could have a baby, to which she responds that he has a child that he bound to him. And then abandoned, botched the dragon interrupts the argument. Den in ominous tones declares that Yennefer will never regain her womb, and that although Geralt never wants to lose Yennefer, he will. Yennefer leaves, and Borch tells Geralt that his destiny is still out there, meaning Ciri. Of course Borch leaves, and Geralt lets out his anger on Yskyr, basically telling him to leave as well. If you're looking for a hinge moment in Season 1, it's right there. Yennefer discovers her fate is bound to Geralt, but decides to leave him. Geralt is told twice that he should face up to his responsibilities, Ciri, and finally decides that he will, the man who has spent almost the entire season fighting against destiny. It's finally going to embrace it, because we next see Geralt in Episode 7 arriving at Cintra to claim Ciri Pavetta. Of course, as was the case when Dany tried to claim what was his through the lure of surprises, having none of it trying to fob him off with a lucky, and then when Geralt isn't fooled, throws him into prison. And this is the point at which Geralt timeline catches up with Ciri's because Nilfgaard attack. We see it here from Geralt's perspective, and back in Episode 1 from Ciri's perspective. They're happening at the same time Geralt escapes during the confusion of the attack. Cologne Thai finally comes to her senses as the castle is about to fall and realizes that the safest place for Ciri right then actually is with Geralt. But it's too late, he's already gone. So Kalante entrusts Ciri to Mousesack, and everything we see in her story over the episodes of Season 1 happens in the few days after the destruction of Cintra. She meets the elves. Nilfgaard clearly wants to capture her once and the doppelganger after her. And so on. The most important point here, though, is what appears to be the awakening of her powers at the end of Episode 7-1 of her old street friends from Cintra finds her and decides to hand her over to Nilfgaard. There's a reward after all, and she unleashes her power. They didn't stand a chance. This isn't the first time we've seen Ciri's powers. She screams when her grandmother sends her away, rattling a few glasses. Then again later as she's escaping Cintra, creating a chasm in the ground. This time she hurls her captors away from her, killing them. She blacks out, but is helped from there by Zola, one of the kindly as people in this season who cares for her in her farmstead until her husband returns. While Ciri is there, she sees the signs of a distant battle raging. This, we find out in a bit, is the Battle of Sodden Hill, which brings us back round to Yennefer. Finally, in this last episode, all of the strands of the story are starting to come together and happen at the same time. We left Yennefer striding away from Geralt, having been told by the dragon that she would never regain her womb, and angry with Geralt that he had bound her fate to his. She heads off to find her first lover, instead wondering whether she can rekindle that romance, and we probably can't judge her for that. But no, he doesn't want her now for years. He chased after her and she pushed him away, and now it's the other way around. But while she's there, another sorcerer, Wilberforce, persuades her to return to Arethusa. She goes, and we're plunged back into the world of paternalistic politics for the continent. Nilfgaard are about to attack Cintra. Should the Brotherhood of Sorcerers intervene? No, they decide, so as we saw, Cintra had no magical defenses against the overwhelming opposition. Well, Mousesack was there and did a great job, but he couldn't last forever. Cintra fell, and Nilfgaard were still pushing forward if the Brotherhood were going to do anything to save the northern kingdoms. Their best chance was to take a stand at Sodden Hill, an old elven stronghold, and some of the sorcerers do decide to take a stand, including Yennefer Triss Marigold, who doesn't have a huge role this season, but will be important later to Saya and many others. But the odds are not good, as well as having a large army. Nilfgaard has been conscripted mages, as they've been going a huge battle ensues, and Nilfgaard clearly have the upper hand. The critical moment, though, happens when Yennefer and Tasya find themselves alone on a high point overlooking the battle. They have a moment when Yennefer finally acknowledges that Tasya saved her from a life of drudgery all those years ago, and Tasya accepts that Yennefer should follow her instincts and let her natural powers flow. Yennefer takes this advice, kennels all of the negative emotions he had bottled up inside her, and unleashes fiery hell on the Nilfgaardians. And we don't know what happened next. We get a dream that Ciri seems to interceptive to Sayer and Geralt looking for Yennefer afterwards, but that's it. What we do have is the scene I talked about at the start of this video, which rounds off the season, Geralt and Ciri finally meeting. We've already talked about Ciri's journey to that farmstead. Geralt escaped from the Sidra, and on his way through the hinterland stumbles across a merchant whose kindly heart has moved him to bury the bodies of dead refugees from the war, trying to give them some dignity. Geralt was on his way back to Kaer Morhen and clearly wanted to just ignore what was happening and move on, but by now the idea that he can stay neutral has long passed when ghouls attack the merchant. Geralt turns back to save him, but is bitten in the process. The merchant carries him back to his farmstead. It is, of course, the same farms there, that Ciri was at the merchant's. Wife was the one who took her back there, and now the merchant is bringing him to her. There is one throwaway moment here that reinforces the link between Geralt and Ciri. The merchant says that he can never repay Geralt for saving his life, but he offers him the lure of surprise, that which he has, but does not know the new thing awaiting him when he returns home. He gives it to Geralt, whatever it is, and the first thing the merchant's wife actually lets call her Zoella for that is her name, and her role is just as important as Yoga. The merchant's ease, the first thing she says is that they have found a girl, Ciri, and she is in the woods. Geralt remembers something that ran free way back in episode 1, told him that the girl in the woods is his destiny, and he goes to her. The season ends with destiny finally fulfilled. Geralt and Ciri twice bound together by the law of surprise. He, the legendary witcher, she, the magic user of Oz, yet fathomed depths, finding each other in the woods, as prophesied in the distance. Yennefer's fate is in the balance, but she, too, is bound to Geralt and Ciri whether she likes it or not, and we'll see where that leads in Season 2. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like more, which are videos either explaining the concepts or doing some character studies. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it informative and engaging. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below in the comments section. I'll do my best to respond to each and every one of them. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more content like this. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate your support and feedback. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover in future videos, please let us know. We're always looking for new ideas to bring you valuable and exciting content. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
Fucking around, I keep crying, no. I ain't tryna tell you what to do, we're tryna play cool. Baby, I ain't playing